Heidi Akine, back to class, please. The government's plan to coax 1,000 teachers to the job. It's also promising extra tutoring and catch-up help for students struggling after COVID disruptions. But is it too late for those sitting NCEA this year? The Queen's spent her last night at Buckingham Palace. Later today, she'll move to Westminster, where she will lie in state. We're live to London. Some Christchurch students are warned not to wear their uniforms out and about due to violent attacks. And a loo paper crisis is averted as mill workers get ready to return to the job. You can catch us live on Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. Tēnā koutou katoa I tēnei ahi pō, I should say. Good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The Secondary Teachers Union is accusing the government of failing to provide a long-term solution to the teacher shortage. The government today announced a $24 million boost to recruitment in the hope of attracting 700 more foreign teachers and 300 more New Zealanders. Melanie Webber from the Post-Primary Teachers Association says the best way to recruit more teachers is to make the profession more attractive.
We need to make sure that we are attracting people into the profession, and we're needing to make sure that it's a profession people feel able to stay in. That's making sure that we've got the pay and conditions that people need, rather than saying this is too hard, I'm going to go off somewhere else. I'm seeing a lot of people leaving.
Melanie Webber says the initiatives are only short-term fixes. A Kawerau paper mill worker says he's relieved a 5-week-long lockout is at an end. A revised pay deal was agreed today between the company, Essity and union members, meaning workers will return on Monday. Machine operator Bill George says it will take time for trust between workers and the company to be regained.
I think it's got to be a lot of goodwill from both sides, but I think the company's going to have to sort of start from scratch to build up their trust again.
Bill George says he's glad the community rallied around the locked-out mill workers. The head of the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter says waste was poorly handled at the site in the past, but its performance is improving. A new Southland Regional Council assessment shows a significant amount of contamination has been released into the environment. Smelter Chief Executive Chris Blinkeron says it recognises some waste was handled poorly in the past, and this wasn't acceptable. He says work is already underway to remove waste and improve environmental performance and monitoring. The Regional Council is seeking further information to decide on the next steps. Mourners have been queuing to pay their respects later tonight to Queen Elizabeth when she lies in state in London's Westminster Hall. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to join a line snaking across the centre of the British capital over the next 4 days. The security operation is described as one of the biggest in the country's history. The BBC's Jonathan Beale reports.
Plans have long been in place for the monarch's death, but it's still been a major challenge to get everything ready. Some of the troops taking part had to be flown back from deployments abroad. Members of the Queen's Company, the Grenadier Guards, who'll carry the Queen's coffin, were, until a few days ago, providing security in Iraq. The procession will include representatives of the Royal Navy, the Army and the RAF. The commanding officer of the Household Division, Major General Chris Geiker, has described it as a sad but proud day for those in the armed forces who swore their allegiance to the Queen.
The Food Safety Authority is urging people to cook frozen berries before eating them after 3 cases of hepatitis A. New Zealand Food Safety says the elderly, pregnant people and those with chronic liver damage should take extra care. The organisation says there isn't enough information to issue a targeted product recall, but isn't ruling out doing so if more cases arise. Hepatitis A is relatively rare in New Zealand, but in 2015, imported frozen berries were linked to an outbreak. Written tributes, flowers and balloons have been placed on the site where a teenage girl's body was found in a car in Havelock North. Adiki Rigby was only 18 and a homicide investigation has now been launched. Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen is at the scene.
Lying on the burned out black patch of grass where the car was found at the River Road Reserve are colourful flowers, and there's even a couple of beer bottles among the bouquets. There's also a message: R.I.P. Aoraki Rigby, you deserved so much more. You mattered, you were loved. So sorry this was where your life ended. Police are still looking for information on what happened. Anyone who knows anything can call 105 or Crime Stoppers anonymously.
Now to sport, and the All Blacks lock Brodie Retallick is adamant New Zealand's near 2 decades of Bledisloe Cup dominance hasn't diminished the trophy's prestige. The series' relevance will again be tested tomorrow night in Melbourne as Ian Foster's team look to seal the trophy for a 20th successive year. Retallick, who has known nothing but Bledisloe's success against the Wallabies, says the team was reminded how much the cup means when former captain Richie McCaw spoke to them recently.
When I first come into the team was the players like Richie and Dan and Kiwi Mialamu, all those guys that kind of installed how much it means to the team and showed us what it meant in the history. And now I guess as a senior player, we're passing that on to the newer guys.
The Jamaican side to play the Silver Ferns in a 3-test netball series starting in Hamilton on Saturday is missing several stars. Jamaica's squad bears little similarity to the team that won silver at the Commonwealth Games. Only 3 players from that side have been selected. Next month's season-ending Live Golf Team Championship will offer the richest purse in golf history, with $83 million up for grabs across the tournament. And in Champions League football, Liverpool beat Ajax 2-1. Tottenham lost 2-0 to Sporting Lisbon, while Bayern Munich beat Barcelona 2-0. That's the news.
The Queen arrives at Buckingham Palace.
The final return. Lots of people cheering when the status arrived. They just wanted to show their appreciation.
But Christopher Luxon won't be joining her in London.
No, I haven't been invited. Those are ultimately decisions for the Prime Minister, I guess. But, I'll be watching.
And he's not the only one feeling left out.
People are being arrested just for shouting out who elected him, or yesterday when I was threatened with arrest for writing "Not My King" on the sign.
Including you in all the coverage. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National, on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday, from Northland to Taumadu Nui, including Coromandel, the Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Isolated showers clearing tonight, fine at first tomorrow, but isolated showers from the afternoon. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, showers with snow above 700 metres affecting higher roads this evening. Showers retreating to the ranges tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine elsewhere. From Taranaki to Wellington and the Wairarapa, showers clearing to fine this evening, mainly fine with a frosty start tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from scattered showers in Nelson clearing tonight. Canterbury and Otago, fine today, a frosty start tomorrow, then rain is developing in Clutha and Dunedin in the evening. Bulla and Westland, fine with frosts overnight, cloud increasing tomorrow evening and coastal showers are developing. Southland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with showers about the Southland coast, rain developing in Fiordland tomorrow morning and elsewhere at night. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, long fine spells. The time is 7 minutes past 5. Our next news headlines and traffic are at 5:20.
Nā mihi, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government's pumping $44 million into recruiting 1,000 more teachers and supporting students who are behind in their learning due to COVID disruptions. The aim is to coax 700 teachers here from overseas and recruit 300 locally. It's extending the offer of relocation grants and schools finders fees. $20 million is going on catch-up teaching and tutoring services, including exam prep, workshops, tutorials, homework and mentoring. There will also be 500 more places in summer school to give Year 11 and 12 students more time to earn NCEA credits. Well, joining me now is the Associate Education Minister, Jan Tinetti. Tēnā koe e te minita.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Can you just give us a little bit more detail about where you think these 1,000 teachers are coming from and by when?
So the package that is announced today is 700. We're working to attract 700 more teachers from overseas and 300 domestically. We know that from what my officials are telling me at the moment that there is a high interest to work in New Zealand, and so we need to speed that process up. And then domestically, we have a number of people who want to work within teaching who perhaps are in other professions at the moment, and so we're looking at ways that we can work that through. And overseas, we're looking at Term 1, Term 2 next year, and for our domestic pipeline, we're really looking for those teachers to start in the workforce by 2024.
Okay, so when you say locally you're wanting to get 300 people, some of them in other jobs, are you talking about people who are already qualified as teachers or starting afresh?
No, starting afresh. So we're looking at people who may be in other professions at the moment, saying to us, we would really like to go into teaching. So that's what the Change in Career Scholarship is around in that aspect. Or I've spoken to principals who have said to me, it would be great if we could have these teachers working within our schools while they're training. And we're currently running 2 pilots through Auckland at the moment in that area, and we want to see those pilots expanded.
Minister, the government has been trying to encourage teachers to come here for some time from overseas. And in fact, in July 2021, the Minister, Chris Hipkins, offered 300 border exemptions to get overseas teachers to come here. How many overseas teachers have you managed to recruit since then?
So over that time, we did manage to recruit over the COVID time roughly around 600 through the border exemption program, between 300 and 600 through that program. We do know
300 to 600 is a big gap, Minister. Was it more towards 600 or 300?
Probably more towards the 300. I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, but I do know that we managed to fill those places with the teachers the border exemption that we went through. But this program is about, now that we've had lots of interest in New Zealand, exactly what you're saying, making it more of a place that people want to come to and putting us competitively with those other countries who are trying to attract their overseas workforce as well.
So the relocation grants, are they still up to 10 grand?
Yes.
For an overseas?
Yes, so they've gone from 5 to 10,000.
And the school finder's fee still $3.5 grand if they bring someone in from overseas?
Yes, yeah. So that's again for the schools to be able to work that through. That's
been on offer since July. So how many applications have you had for those grants?
So at the moment we've had around 250, I think it is, that we've had people that have been moving through in that area, and we're processing that currently, and had lots of interest in it as well.
But how many of these people are actually in front of the classroom right now?
They're actually for 2023, so we won't see any of those coming through at the moment. What schools are telling me is that they're recruiting now, so that this is what they're wanting to see coming through and to help them for their recruitment for next year.
Isn't that the problem, though? You're talking about those people not coming online in front of the classroom until 2023. And again, you've got the problem, you can't create new teachers overnight. So they're not coming online until 2023 or beyond then.
So schools are recruiting for 2023 now, and so this is to help schools recruit. One of the big parts of the announcement that we did make today was that we're funding additional roles in NZQA, the New Zealand Qualifications Authority, and the Teaching Council and Education Payroll to reduce the bureaucracy, that sits around processing overseas teachers' assessments. So what we're working on is getting that pathway quicker. We know that we can get in front of kids at the beginning of 2023 if we make that pathway quicker.
20 million for additional teacher and tutoring services. This is exam prep to catch people up and help them with homework and mentoring. So who is actually going to do that if you are short of teachers, and who decides who gets the service?
So schools, this is a school-based program. Schools know their young people best. They will be able to decide who the young people are who need this catch-up time. And so the workforce that we've got will be, some will be working within schools now, because we know that schools have part-time teachers that operate as tutors within their school now. They will be able to make that decision around that flexibility. But the Ministry of Education is also developing an expert panel of providers that can go into schools if that's what schools will prefer. So people that are already working in the tutoring field may be able to go into schools through being on that expert panel.
Minister, we're running out of time, so a couple of quick things. Again, an expert panel and getting people into schools sounds like it's going to take time. Are you going to get this scaled up in time to help students who are doing NCEA in a matter of weeks?
We know that we can get this scaled very quickly.
Okay. How much of the $44 million announced today is actually new money?
This is money that's been reprioritised, all of it.
From where, Minister?
So this is from the vote education, and it has been reprioritised through underspends.
So you're taking it away from other education projects to put into this education project. Which ones have you taken it from?
No, it's been underspends.
And can you tell us what areas?
It will be in how staffing has worked, so it will stay within the staffing area.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the Associate Education Minister, Jan Tinetti there. It is almost 5:15. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And do let us know your thoughts on that one. Text us on 2101, hoping to recruit 1,000 teachers, 700 from overseas. A warning's been issued about frozen berries, which have been linked to 3 cases of hepatitis A. New Zealand Food Safety says there's not sufficient information on a specific brand to initiate a targeted product recall. But there have been 3 cases in people who regularly eat frozen berries. Those with chronic liver damage, the elderly and pregnant people are being told to be especially careful if eating frozen berries. So this is the advice. Briefly boil frozen berries before eating them, or ensure cooking temperatures exceed 85 degrees Celsius for 1 minute, and wash your hands before eating and preparing food. Food Safety is saying it's working with the frozen berry suppliers to ensure they are aware of potential risks, and they're actively managing the issue. Now, to me, this is a really curious thing. So do let me know. Do you boil your berries? Well, you're going to have to, right, because of this. 2101 on text or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And how do you know what 85 degrees Celsius is? Evie?
I'm making the face that I'll be making if I ate hot berries.
You only do that if you're making one of those posh sauces.
Coulis
or something similar. So I don't know how that works and how they can't identify which berries it is. Really interested in your feedback on that one. A series of violent attacks on teenagers around a Christchurch mall has sparked concerns among community leaders. A Christchurch secondary school has issued a warning to parents, with officials now meeting to figure out a solution to the spate of youth violence. Some residents who have witnessed attacks on teenagers believe the problem around the city is getting worse. Adam Burns reports.
Students at Christchurch Boys High School have been subject to multiple assaults, including recent incidents at Riccarton's Westfield Mall and a nearby bus exchange. It prompted an email from the school's Year 11 Dean Chris Kilkelly to parents on Monday, advising students not to wear their school uniform in case of being targeted. But Headmaster Nick Hill did not believe the incidents were linked to the school or part of a targeted campaign against its students.
We're not aware of a link to the school. We believe they're random attacks. We know that students from other schools have also been assaulted. Police are involved. It's a traumatic event for the boys, their parents, so we'll support the families and we are working with the police.
Police say a 15-year-old has been arrested and charged following a number of incidents at the mall, the latest occurring on Saturday. Canterbury Police Inspector Vicky Walker says it received multiple calls following reports of a large group of youths fighting. Horswell Hornby Community Board Chair Mike Mora says there is growing concern.
Seems to me that they're just attacking people because they're young and they feel like as a group they need to go and attack somebody to show they've got control over the area, which is very disappointing and concerning.
Mike Mora says a community safety meeting is being organised, with problems reportedly occurring throughout the city. Beyond Christchurch, retailers and shoppers at malls around the country have noted increased antisocial behaviour. Retail NZ's Greg Harford says ongoing incidents could impact business.
Ultimately, if customers or indeed staff members are fearful about going into store, they may not. They may stay away. It can lead to a decline in sales, and it can make people feel really unsafe and on edge as they go to work and leave at the end of the day.
So what do patrons around Riccarton think? Some shoppers RNZ spoke to today believe youth attacks were commonplace.
And I actually watched a bunch jump another wee schoolgirl thing, and then her mother had come out from the street just opposite the dumplings up the road there, looking for the children, but they were long gone.
I watched a girl that I knew get dragged out from the bus depot just up here by her hair, and she was pummeled by 7 people about 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, and she was dragged out by her hair.
We never really go without each other, whereas in tours or groups. Yeah.
Oh, I'd never come out at night. No.
Police say there were another 2 incidents where youths were threatened and had items stolen. Inspector Vicky Walker says there is an increase of police and patrolling around Westfield.
And Queen Elizabeth's coffin has spent one final night at Buckingham Palace before a procession to Westminster takes place overnight our time. Princess Anne accompanied her mother on a flight from Edinburgh to Northolt and was then driven in the state hearse through the packed streets of London to the palace. There, the royal family had gathered for a final night alone before the Queen lies in state for 4 days. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Nick Monroe are in London.
It's a monumental day here in London. The Queen's body is being flown back from Scotland to the capital, where it will lie in state for 4 days. First, it will spend the night in Buckingham Palace after being driven there from a nearby Air Force base. We're here at Constitution Hill, the last point before the final stretch to Buckingham Palace. Thousands and thousands of people have gathered here for hours, hoping to grab a glimpse of her one last time. A long wait to witness a historic moment. People waited for hours to see the Queen's coffin pass by, returning to Buckingham Palace for one last night. As the rain settles in, so too is Sue Neenan.
I really don't know, but I just had this undying urge to be here today.
And next to her, Deborah James, who feels like the United Kingdom has this week been truly united.
I'm Welsh, and of course Scotland wants another referendum to vote out, and so I'm really pleased that she passed away in Scotland, and the Scottish people have had so much involvement in the end of her reign. Because, you know, I would hate Scotland to leave the United Kingdom. And I think they realise how much the Queen loves Scotland, and Prince Charles feels the same way, our new king.
People have poured out onto the streets for any vantage point to see the Queen's procession, and the crowds are only going to grow.
I'm not sure I'm going to do the 24-hour queuing to see her lying in state. I saw her mother lying in state, the Queen Mother, and I queued for 5.5 hours. But, you know, this is our Queen, and I think the queues are going to be incredible.
Dotted among the crowds were a number of tamariki, their parents hoping they'd remember this historic day.
I think we was probably a bit wary about whether to come or not, especially with the kids, but then I think we feel it's just so important.
The fact she's coming back to Buckingham Palace one more day before she goes. And we brought them to come and lay flowers when Prince Philip died as well, so I thought we need to come and do that for the Queen.
Yeah.
And it's not far of a journey, and it literally just felt like someone of your family had died.
It truly was a family affair, even for Lewis Waugh, who'd unexpectedly stumbled across the crowds while out for a run.
I was going to call my mum and see whereabouts she is. If she's close, I'll stick around. Oh, yeah. If not, probably go back and get some food, yeah. Even though I sort of bumped into her a little bit, you say, maybe I can get and see her a little bit, then all a win, really.
However, near the scenes of commemoration were instead ones of protest, just a few kilometres away at Parliament Square. Anti-monarchists stood with signs calling for an end to the monarchy, a day after a number of people holding similar signs were threatened with arrest. One of those was Paul Powsland, whose sign reads, "Not my king."
Let people mourn the Queen respectfully and to have their grief, but actually at a time when the monarchy is bringing Charles on as the next king and bringing his accession about, then we say we also have a right to object to that peacefully.
Back at Constitution Hill, it was nightfall and the crowds had only grown. Spontaneous applause broke out and 3 cheers for the Queen as the longest reigning monarch passed by and into Buckingham Palace for one final night, surrounded by her family.
And if you were listening to that on radio, do check out the video version of that story. We'll put it on our web page. It is 23 after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Coming up, the sporting misstep over the Queen's death, and homai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. What do you think of the government's plan to coax teachers into the job? 1,000 they want, 700 from overseas. And boiling your berries, you're already getting in touch about that one. What do you do with that? Especially if you make smoothies every morning like I do in that, zippy machine. Anyway, you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to to go to the headlines. Ko Iwi anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The government says a new multi-million-dollar plan will help the education sector get back on its feet after the pandemic. The $24 million package will fund 1,000 more teachers. Another $20 million will boost teaching and tutoring services, targeting support to students most affected by COVID-19 disruptions. The Associate Education Minister, Jan Tinetti, told Checkpoint the extra funding will help attract foreign recruits and people looking to change career. Kawerau paper mill workers will head back to work on Monday after nearly 6 weeks of being locked out with no pay. An employment agreement was reached today between the company Essity and union members who voted to accept a revised pay deal that meets the rising cost of living. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to queue up in central London over the next 4 days to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth. The security operation for the event is described as one of the biggest in Britain's history. The Food Safety Authority is urging people to cook frozen berries before eating them after 3 cases of hepatitis A were identified. New Zealand Food Safety says the elderly, pregnant people and those with chronic liver damage should take extra care. And hundreds of people gathered at Parliament today to mark 50 years since the Maori language petition was delivered. Among those in attendance were members from Te Reo Maori Society and Ngā Tamatoa, who helped rally 33,000 signatures half a century ago. Those are the headlines. Now looking at traffic in the Waikato State Highway 3 north of Oturahanga between Te Kawa and Te Mawhai roads is closed because of a crash. Our next news headlines and traffic news is at 5:40.
Thanks, Evie. We're getting some tips in about the berries. Margie Harris says a jam thermometer will let us know when we've hit 85 degrees Celsius for boiling your berries. But the thing is, if you're lazy like me and you want to nuke them in the microwave, then how do you know if you've reached the temperature point?
And you certainly can't put the thermometer into the microwave.
No, and also you'll have a berry explosion.
But they'll be little bombs.
Yeah, exactly. And someone else says berry boiling, followed by 4 or 5 exclamation marks. They will be sludge, which is your point, Evie. And berries don't come cheaply. Also, how do we know if they're New Zealand berries? Clay's joining us. Clay Wilson, sports reporter, joining us in the studio.
Sports and berries expert.
Yeah, and berries expert. Do they label them? I don't know. I haven't checked.
I'm still trying to get my head around your zippy description for a blender.
Yeah, that's the blender. That's the word I'm looking for. The blending machine for smoothies. Thank you, Clay.
I don't know.
All right. Tributes have been flowing from all different places after the death of the Queen last week, including, of course, social media. But a rugby league player in Australia is in hot water after her post appears to celebrate the Queen's death. Now, what do you know about that, Clay?
Yeah, this is an interesting story because there's perhaps more to it than meets the eye initially. Now, her name is Caitlin Moran. She's an NRLW player. She's a former Jillaroos player, the Jillaroos being the Australian national women's team. And after the Queen died last week, she put up a post with some quite strong language, which pretty much, as you say, appeared to celebrate the Queen's death. Now, she deleted it 8 hours later, but not in time for the NRL themselves to see it. They've seen it, they've had a look at it, and they're saying they're going to ban her for 1 game. 1 game doesn't sound like a lot, but they only play 5 games in the NRLW season, so it's essentially 20% of their season they're going to ban her for, and she's the first player to be banned in that competition for any kind of off-field incident. Since this has all come to light, her coach is actually at Newcastle has actually come out somewhat in defence of her, because Caitlin Moran is an Indigenous woman, an Indigenous player, and he noted that the relationship between the Indigenous peoples of Australia and the monarchy is quite a complicated one given the history. And also there's been a lot of Indigenous leaders in Australia that have been critical of the legacy of the monarchy and the Queen and the treatment they've had historically. So, as I say, it's something that you can perhaps understand her point here, maybe not the best way to go about it, but there's more to it than just someone making an angry, perhaps inappropriate post about the Queen. Yeah,
even our own MPs, our Māori MPs, have raised concerns about how complicated the relationship is with the Queen as well. And it's not only sporting controversy that's popped up in Australia since the death of the Queen. What else? Yeah, so in the women's AFL competition, the AFL being Aussie rules, most of the matches over the weekend, they decided not to have a minute's silence at the start. There's a lot of sporting events, competitions have been doing a minute's silence to honour the Queen's passing. But they did this because it was the Indigenous round
for their women's AFL competition, and they decided it wasn't appropriate to do it. Now, and the Western Bulldogs are one of the big clubs in the AFL, and they put out a statement about this, and their director, Belinda Duarte, she's an Indigenous woman, and what she said is that the idea of commemorating the Queen, and the words she used were unearthed deep wounds. So the idea of doing that during an Indigenous round, which is special for those people, wasn't really as comfortable as it might seem for other people, that while a lot of Australians want to mourn the Queen, want to show their respect in that way, that it's not as simple as that. It brings up a lot of history for those first peoples, the monarchy, what it represents to them. So I guess, and not just in sport, but in a lot of areas, we're going to see, once the mourning period is over, we're going to see some of these issues start to pop up, it looks like, and it's going to be some discussion about those sort of things.
Yeah, and it's complicated, and it's not just in sport, and it's not even after the mourning process. Even in the UK, we have seen people wanting to express their opinions. It's already coming up, isn't it? Yeah. And it is already coming up as an issue. Thanks for that, Clay. Sports reporter Clay Wilson there. An anti-car urban activists manifesto or a roadmap to safer streets for walkers and cyclists. You decide. Controversial legislation changes proposed by the Transport Minister will mean local authorities can trial street changes, restrict vehicles, remove car parks and outlaw congestion-inducing school drop-off zones with very little notice. Pilot schemes can run for up to 2 years, with consultation after the pilot. Now, a number of business and retail groups are not pleased. Well, joining me now is Newmarket Business Association boss Mark Knopf-Thomas. Kia ora, Mark. What's the problem with this from your point of view?
Kia ora, Lisa. I think, we understand the intent of what the legislation's trying to achieve. And, we're all about agility, because as it stands now, it is quite challenging to do anything innovative on a street. It's quite problematic. What concerns us greatly, actually, is the lack of consultation. So we could have a local authority, in the situation for me, for example, Auckland Transport, who may decide that they want to do something on one of our streets or in any street in Auckland without consulting the local community, the local businesses, and for an up to 2 year period while they do a pilot program. And, looking at that at a macro level, it probably doesn't sound that bad. But, in reality, the lived experiences that we have dealing with our local transport provider hasn't always been great. And I don't honestly have great amount of faith that Auckland Transport will be able to deliver things in a good way right now as it stands.
Simply put, is your concern that you're going to lose car parks?
No, not at all. I mean, there are some people who get very upset about the loss of street parking. I get that. And, they've got their own reasons to say that. So it's not... To be clear, we're not Luddites and we're not dinosaurs, and we can appreciate that the nature of how we move around our city, especially in Auckland, is changing and has to change. But right now, and going by the track record we've had from Auckland Transport and also from Waka Kotahi, not a great track record of implementing things, not great executors of projects, often with delays, mistakes, rework and causing problems, and they have to go do things all over again. So as a concept, it's not terribly bad, but the consultation thing and not being able to do things from the local level up is of great concern to us.
The consultation thing, though, normally you consult before a project goes ahead and everyone gives their reckons, right? They don't actually have any evidence. If you do a pilot for 2 years, you actually see how it works. And so when you consult the community, they're talking about real things that have happened. Doesn't that make more sense?
At face value it does, but also if the pilot is not successful and they decide not to go ahead with it, they will then provide the feedback of why they decided not to go ahead with it. If, however, in there they deem the pilot to be successful, based on the wording I've seen, they will not be giving feedback as to why they're going to continue or make it permanent.
The thing is, you say you don't have trust in the organisations behind this, and I get what you are saying, but what is the worst that could happen? What is your actual fear here? And what will eventuate?
The real fear, really, I guess, is harming business. I mean,
How will it harm business? Because it brings me back to that argument about car parks, which is what people will think listening to this, that you are worried about car parks going to make way for cyclists and pedestrians.
You go and talk to any business in Auckland Central right now around the Queen Street area and Albert Street, and the problem they've had with the response or the developments ongoing for a number of years. If these things were going to be done laparoscopically, magically overnight by Tinkerbell with fairy dust, so the next morning they've all appeared, it probably wouldn't be that bad as a trial. But we know full well from our lived experience that is not how things happen. Things take. I've got a great example of an Auckland transport project in Newmarket right now, which has now gone on for 4 months. Was supposed to be for 6 to 8 weeks. Massive delays, lack of communication, upset businesses. Things have gone all over the place. And this is a tiny project, a very tiny project, putting in some traffic lights. So I think my level of trust and faith in the ability for our local transport provider to do it in a very good way is very, very doubtful.
So you support making way for more cycling and pedestrian areas. You support bike lanes in Newmarket, and you'd be happy to forego car parks in order to achieve that?
I'll just say for the record that we are pro everything. So we are pro cars, we're pro buses, we're pro trains, pedestrians. We want the pedestrian experience ultimately to be a good thing. So,
but
when
sometimes, Mark, you have to give up space to enable those other forms of transport. And so that's the crux of my question to you. Whether you're prepared to give up some more space for pedestrians and cyclists.
Newmarket has got great experiences or great examples now where we have given up parking spaces, and we are kind of slowly evolving. But what concerns me about Broadway, for example, in Newmarket, making it very local, is that we've got hundreds of buses coming through Broadway on a daily basis. And what concerns me mostly, I mean, we've got cars too, I get that, but we've become a thundering tunnel of buses, and that is what we're on danger of becoming now. So we're all about traffic calming. We love the fact that pedestrians get longer to walk around the streets. I love all of that stuff. But what concerns me is this has got to be driven by practical and done in a really staged, managed way, and that requires consultation, taking feedback on board. If you're a retail owner or a business owner, you've just signed a 5-year lease for a site based on the understanding of what you're signing up for, and suddenly that all changes. That's not cool, and that needs to be consulted on meaningfully with the local communities. Local up is what I'd sort of really say we'd be promoting, local up, not from the local authority down.
Ngā mihi moto wā. Thank you so much for your time tonight. That's Mark Knopf-Thomas, who's from the Newmarket Business Association. It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nāianei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us in the studio. Okay, we're talking Briscoes, right? First half result falls short of last year. Have we given up cooking now that we're not locked down?
Well, perhaps we have, but I think more importantly, the supply chain disruptions, those additional costs, but also the rising labour costs. And Briscoe has spent more, their expenses have increased. Revenue's up, profits are down about 4%. The company still thinks that's an excellent result, given the situation that we're seeing with, fewer people shopping and so on. Margins are down a little bit. I guess they're having to sharpen their pencil a little more. And they also increased their wage rates for their in-store hourly staff by 7% from April. And we're seeing that across many industries. There's a lot of that going on, increased wages. That's inflationary. And of course, it's adding to costs. There'll be, I guess, a time that there'll be some adjustment, but for now, we are definitely seeing wages being bid up for sure, as companies are competing for very few people in the labour market.
Okay, hotter than expected United States inflation numbers have put the equity markets into a bit of a tailspin. What about our markets, Nona?
Not so bad for our market, I can say. So earlier today, on the heels of Wall Street close down between 4 and 5%. Those are the three big markets there. Not a very good day on Wall Street, but that's because U.S. core inflation surprised on the upside. Much stronger than people were expecting, 6.3% for core inflation. That means that the U.S. Federal Reserve has got no option but to hike interest rates to fight back against that inflation. And so big interest rate hikes in the United States is not good for the markets because, of course, it raises the cost of money. And if money costs more, well, everything else costs more too. That means your profits are hit and so forth. So overall, the markets in Asia and the United States took a hit, but we didn't do too badly. This morning, 1.5% down, But today at the close, 0.9% drop. And if you think about it, Briscoe, with their 4% drop in profit, doesn't matter because their share price rose more than 2% today. And that's because I guess there's still a lot of confidence in our market. And one of our commentators suggested it's because New Zealand is seen as being ahead of the inflation curve. So we're probably, because our interest rates went first and there have been, we've seen a lot of interest rate hikes recently. Of course, that's reflected in our house prices. But, we're tackling big inflation like food prices, for example. So inflation's an issue for everybody.
So where did our dollar settle after some nasty numbers first thing?
Yes, so we were below 60 cents US, which is not, again, a surprise, but we perked up. Just before at the end of the close, it was at 60 cents. 60.03 exactly. 89.1 Australian, which is about where we've been for a while, and 52.1 pence, which is about business as normal.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite and Nona Peltier there with Business News. It is almost 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We are always keen for your feedback, homai or whakaaro, whether it's on berries or trying to recruit teachers. Let us know your thoughts. And also, how do you feel about legislation changes that would mean, changes on the street can happen quite quickly, make way for more cycle lanes, more pedestrian access? Are you for it or against it? They could stop you parking your car outside school and dropping your kids off, which is a bit of a calamity in the mornings if you're driving around in Auckland. Do text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpoint.rnz, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines. Anea Evie, mina pita pita kōrero.
Lisa. The Secondary Teachers Association, is that where we're at? Yes, the Secondary Teachers Union says the government's $24 million recruitment drive announced today is only a short-term fix. Melanie Webber from the Post-Primary Teachers Association says the best way to recruit more teachers is to make the profession more attractive. A revised pay deal has been agreed between the company Essity and union members, meaning Kawerau paper mill workers will return on Monday after nearly 6 weeks of being locked out with no pay. 145 union members from the mill voted to accept a revised pay deal that will meet the rising cost of living. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukrainian forces have now retaken 8,000 square kilometres of territory from Russian forces, and half of that is now secure. The security operation for the Queen's lying-in state at London's Westminster Hall is being described as one of the biggest in Britain's history. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to queue over the next 4 days to pay their respects. A series of violent attacks on teenagers around Christchurch have sparked concerns among community leaders. Christchurch Boys High School students have been subject to multiple assaults, and a community safety meeting is being organised. And New Zealand Food Safety is warning people about a risk of contracting hepatitis A from eating frozen berries. 3 recent cases of the disease are regular eaters of imported frozen berries, and an outbreak in 2015 was linked to berries. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland, a crash is blocking the left westbound lane on State Highway 16 just after the Great North Road off-ramp, and in the Waikato, State Highway 3 north of Otorohanga between Te Kawa and Te Mawhai roads is closed because of a crash. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thank you, Evie. A loo paper crisis has been averted, with paper mill workers in Kawerau finally sealing a pay deal with owners Essity after a bitter standoff. For about 6 weeks, members of the Pulp and Paper Workers Union had been locked out with no pay. But they voted this morning to accept a revised offer that was in line with recommendations made by the Employment Relations Authority. Now, the deal means a 5% pay rise this year, 4.5% and 4% over the following 2 years, with 2 lump sum payments totalling $7,000. The Union Secretary, Tane Phillips, joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Was everyone in favour of taking this deal?
It wasn't unanimous, but it was heavily in favour.
And so how would you describe the overriding emotion?
I think there was relief, but there was also a sense of pride that the union members stuck together and they prevailed. But there was a certain relief there, of course.
Is it a reason to celebrate, do you think? Or is it still a bit raw?
It's probably a bit raw today. Tomorrow, we're going to have a barbecue and celebrate with our whānau and friends and supporters in Govt tomorrow.
So, how good do you think the deal is, given what you were asking for, what they initially offered and where you've settled?
I think it's a fair, reasonable deal. We probably wanted 15% over the 3-year period. We ended up getting about 13.5, but with the way it runs over 3 years, it's probably worth 14.2. So I think it's a fair and reasonable deal, and so did our members.
So why did it take you so long to get here? Were both sides just a little bit stubborn?
Well, kind of. I mean, their first offer was 2%, when CPI was running about 6%. So we said to them very early on they needed to get in what's the reality of happening in the real world. That took a while. I always thought it would be about 5 with a bit of money thrown in. Would get you to 7, over 7% for the year.
Because some people who may not have had pay rises or very small ones will look at this and think you've done pretty well out of it.
That's the 100% unionised site, and the members sticking together.
What do you reckon it's going to be like for them going back to work?
Well, I've been involved in lockouts before. It takes a while for that relationship to heal. It takes a long time. But once we get back to work, we want everyone to get doing their job and producing and making a profit for the company, because it makes sense for both of us.
How would you describe that relationship with the company right now?
A bit raw.
And how does that translate in everyday terms?
Yeah, a bit raw. There will be a bit of standoffishness, that kind of stuff. So we will just have to take time. I mean, time heals most things, but it'll just take time.
Do the workers believe that Essity is in this for the long haul?
Firms have come and gone in Govt, but we've produced toilet paper since the late 50s, early 60s, with different owners. But so who knows? A lot of these multinational companies move around a bit, but there's money in loo paper.
Good to talk to you, Tane. Everybody needs it, the loo paper. Tane Phillips, Union Secretary there, and those workers heading back after reaching a deal finally after an extended lockout and a really bitter battle there. Let's get to some of your feedback on traffic and streets. This listener says, go car-free cities, more shoppers and more walkers. Check out The Hague, Copenhagen, Paris. David said, had an AT pilot project run around our place and it was fine. Much safer street resulted, good communication throughout. Sick of hearing from businesses stopping improvements to the public use of streets. On the subject of berries, got a lot to say on that. One listener says, my children make smoothies with frozen berries most mornings. I'm down with that. Me too. And Genevieve says she's boiling the blueberries right now. Let us know how that works out and how they perform in a smoothie after that process. And Sheila's got in touch to say, I've just looked at the frozen berries online at Countdown, did a random check, and it looks like most of them are imported. Might have to buy fresh and local now. Cheers from Sheila. What's the weather like down there in Turanganui, Akiwa, my hometown? Sheila, really good to hear from you. Do keep your texts coming, 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It's been a day of celebration and reflection for those who delivered the Maori language petition on this day 50 years ago. Now, they, along with others who are still fighting for the language, say the next generation is well placed to continue that fight and keep Te Reo Maori flourishing for generations to come. Our reporter Ashley McCall and cameraman Angus Drever have a wrap of today's events.
It was contrasting scenes to what happened at the Parliament steps 50 years ago. Today, Tino Rangatiratanga flags flew and Te Reo Maori was heard on the stage and throughout the crowd as thousands came together to reflect and remember the battle fought for Te Reo Maori. These kohanga reo tamariki and school students wanted to support the mahi done 50 years ago.
After all what they've been through, it's been a horrible time for them in the ancient times and what the English have done to them. I just felt, I don't know, about hoha, how we actually had to fight for our reo.
At the stroke of midday, the crowd stopped for the Maori language moment. Followed by speeches, including from Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark, a descendant of Hana Te Hemara, who handed over the petition. Half a century later, she's picked up the rako and spoke of the wins Māori have had since then.
Māori Health Authority, Māori Wards, Matariki, Kura Kaipapa, Kohanga Reo, Te Matatini. We're even decolonising our blankets and chocolate.
Members from Ngā Tamatoa, Te Reo Maori Society and Te Hui Ngā Rangatahi, who delivered the petition, were among those in the crowd. There were others who weren't, like the late Hana Te Hemara and the kaumātua that led the opi onto the forecourt all those years ago to see the fruits of their labour, but they were top of the mind for all attending. They were the champions who helped rally 33,000 signatures from across the motu, calling for the revitalisation of Te Reo Maori, and it was a cornerstone moment in reclamation. Rawiri Paratene, who stood with his daughter, Angren's co-leader, Marama Davidson, was touched by the event.
I'm proud to be part of it and great to see heaps of my mates,
old mates,
and see them on the stage, and they're all fluent.
Reo Maori Society member Rob Powhare is also filled with joy at how far the language has come.
Things have advanced so quickly, so much is happening, and I'm so thrilled that our kids are connecting with the language. Not just our kids, I see many New Zealand kids, Pākehā kids, also connecting with the language.
Today we've heard about the history and the challenges Māori face to get Te Reo to where it is today. Taking the time to pause and to celebrate, speakers laying down a whittle to the next generation to grow and to cherish this tonga, saying the fight isn't over. Māori Language Commissioner Rawania Higgins echoes this whakaaro.
As much as we take for granted today the language and all the initiatives that have come out of the language, I think there's still much more to do. And it's the young people. So the young people brought this petition to Parliament. It's the young people who are here today celebrating that and hopefully find inspiration from all those unsung heroes.
She says we have come so far in that time and those signatures have definitely not gone to waste. She's encouraging rangatahi to speak with their grandparents about their fight to keep the language going, with hopes it will be even stronger in 50 years' time.
Kia kaha te reo Māori.
Kia kaha te reo Māori.
Kia kaha te reo Māori.
Tau care. And that report from Ashley McCall and Angus Drever will be on our website, the video version. Do check it out. Now, in breaking news, police say the driver of the ambulance involved in this morning's crash on Te Reo Road in Cambridge has sadly died in hospital. The two-vehicle crash involving a car and an ambulance happened just after 3:30 this morning. The driver of the car died at the scene. Police say their thoughts are with the families of the deceased. The circumstances of the crash remain under investigation. It is 9 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. In a major step for Auckland's City Rail Link project, the last of 4 tunnel breakthroughs is happening tonight. Our reporter Tom Taylor is 15 metres underground at Waihorotu station and joins us now. Kia ora, Tom. Talk us through what's happening.
Good evening, Lisa. Yeah, well, we're in for quite a boring night tonight, and I don't say that out of a lack of interest. What I'm standing here in front of is the 4th of 4 tunnels to burst through from Mount Eden Station here to Te Waihorotu Station just outside Aotea. And the tunnel boring machine that's going to burst through there is called Dame Whina Cooper. Now, we're at an event tonight where the family of Dame Whina Cooper will be attending, along with the Mayor of Auckland, Phil Govt, and representatives from the City Rail Link, along with a whole bunch of workers who've been on the project for the last few years. So it's quite a cool atmosphere here. There's song and dance going on upstairs, a live cellist. It's all go here.
And what actually happens to the machine, the boring machine, after all of this?
Yeah, so this machine was actually custom built in Germany for the soils here in Auckland, specifically made for that. So it's interesting, they're actually packing it all up. That's going to be craned upstairs to Wellesley Street, or the ground level there, in parts, and then it's just going to be shipped back to its manufacturer in Germany. So we won't actually get to see it being used for any other projects on our shores for some time.
Tom, we know you're about 15 metres underground. I mean, what is it like, and what was it like travelling down there? Is it a bit freaky?
Look, it's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of stairs to navigate, some quite narrow stairs, but it's quite open, so not too bad for claustrophobics. No, it's quite open and airy, and you can see kind of the makings of what it's going to be like as a station.
Yeah, pretty amazing to see it. Is there any word, though, on the updated budget for this project?
No, Lisa, that's the question on everyone's mind, and it's a question no one seems to be able to answer at this point. At latest counts, and this has already gone up by $1 billion, mind you, since the beginning of the project. It was sitting at about $4.4 billion, but that's not even taking into account the effects of the pandemic. So it's really anyone's guess at this point how much that will go up by. It's a matter of negotiations with contractors at the moment, but they should have a firmer kind of budget for that by the end of the year, they're saying. There's also no timeline. Sorry?
You carry on, no timeline?
There's also no timeline set for the project at this stage, so that could get extended out a number of months. They're not saying years at this point, but it could get extended out by some time as well, just given the impact of COVID and the amount of time workers needed to essentially set down their tools, and progress was very limited for a number of months during lockdowns.
Hey Tom, before you go, we can hear a mighty racket there. Is that the people there for the celebration, or have they fired up the machine?
Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes. I'm almost tempted to look behind me and see if it's bursting through, but no, that's just the festivities going on upstairs, which I'm quite keen to go take part in. It seems like a riotous time up there.
Yeah, well, get out of the way before it gets you. You've got that nice jazzy hard hat on too. Get up there and see what's going on. Report back. Thank you, Tom. That is Tom Taylor, 15 metres underground at Te Waihoretu Station at the Auckland City Rail Link project there. It was getting a bit rowdy, wasn't it? Let's go to the UK now, and one of the Queen's greatest passions from an early age was horses, riding them, showing them, breeding them and watching them race. She herself began riding as a toddler, and it appears Queen Consort Camilla will be the one to take care of Elizabeth's horses. Here's CNN's Anna Stewart.
A moment of silence at Doncaster Racecourse as jockeys and staff pause to honour the memory of one of the most beloved patrons of horse racing, Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen rode her first horse at the age of 3, the beginning of a lifelong obsession. The first horse she owned, Peggy, a Shetland pony, was a gift for her 4th birthday from her grandfather, King George V. From then on, riding and racing became as ingrained in her DNA as her royal bloodline. One famous American that shared her love of horses, US President Ronald Reagan, who was said to have asked to go riding with the Queen during his 1982 visit to Windsor, leading to iconic images shared the world over.
The Queen's entry is right up with the leaders.
More than 500,000 people were on hand to witness the Queen's first ever runner in the Epsom Derby in 1953, just 4 days after her coronation. Her horse, Oriel, placed second that day.
That's the ultimate dream, winning the races.
With the exception of the Epsom Derby, she bred and owned winners of every major race on British soil, more than 1,000.
Many times I've watched her up in the box and she's cheering like mad, and she's got that passion about it and she just loves it. And you can see that. That's not a put on. That's not put on. That's from here.
Her love of racing even took her to the Kentucky Derby in 2007, where she and Prince Philip were the guests of honour. The marquee horse racing event in the US, usually a place for people who want to be seen to show off in style, instead saw throngs of adoring fans lining the streets to catch a glimpse of her motorcade. The Queen never lost her love of riding. Up until 1986, she rode on horseback during the annual Trooping the Colour ceremony and continued to go riding for pleasure well into her 90s. She ignited that passion for riding in her children and her grandchildren as well. A young Prince Charles fell in love with the sport of polo, and her daughter, Princess Anne, became the first royal to compete in the Olympics, riding in the equestrian event at the 1976 Montreal Games. Anne's daughter, Zara Tindall, followed in her mother's footsteps, competing in the 2012 London Olympics, winning a silver medal for Great Britain, a feat that delighted her grandmother, the Queen.
Found out she'd won the silver medal, and I remember the Queen just grabbed me and we were dancing around in circles.
And we'll go live to London to speak to Corin Dan, and that'll be after the 6 o'clock news. Some of you getting in touch about teachers, saying education has had consistent underspend for years. This money is a good utilisation of funding and is definitely needed. Another person says, so 600 teachers already attracted is really 300. We're going to poach from other industries that are also screaming out for staff, and we're going to start competing with other countries that have been proactive for months already. Do the proposed 700 overseas teacher have to be familiar with Te Reo, or is the government bypassing this requirement?
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora tātou, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. The government's trying to recruit 1,000 extra teachers to head off a shortage next year. It's spending $24 million on recruitment fees and scholarships. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The government says the latest forecasts are not yet ready, but schools are advertising a lot of vacancies and there are signs a shortage is looming. It hopes the spending announced today will help attract 700 more teachers from overseas and encourage 300 more enrolments in teaching courses. Teacher unions say the measures are short-term and the government needs to make teaching a more attractive career. The pandemic reduced teacher turnover to record lows, but that trend is expected to end because border restrictions have eased and young teachers can work overseas more easily.
Associate Education Minister Jan Tinetti has told Checkpoint research has shown many people in Aotearoa want to become a teacher.
There is a high interest to work in New Zealand, and so we need to speed that process up. And then domestically, we have a number of people who want to work within teaching who perhaps are in other professions at the moment, and so we're looking at ways that we can work that through.
To boost domestic teaching numbers, the government is increasing the number of career changer scholarships available. Police say the driver of the ambulance involved in this morning's crash just south of Cambridge has died. The crash, involving a car and the ambulance, happened shortly before 4 o'clock this morning. The car's driver died at the scene and the ambulance driver was taken to hospital in a critical condition. Police are investigating the cause of the crash. A new report into the impact of the Te Reo Point aluminium smelter says a wide range of contaminants have been released into the environment. Environment Southland has released an assessment by environmental consultants EHS Support of a report commissioned by New Zealand Aluminium Smelters. EHS Support consultant Simon Hunt says contaminants found at the site include fluoride, hydrocarbon, aluminium and heavy metals.
There's a significant amount of groundwater contamination sitting under the site from fluorides, these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are in the pitch, and obviously aluminium. And those are all key contaminants that are kind of generated or used during the manufacturing process.
Simon Hunt says all of the contaminants pose different impacts at different concentrations. The council is seeking more information to determine the impact on the environment. Mourners have begun queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen Elizabeth, who lies in state in London's Westminster Hall from later today. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to join a line snaking across the centre of the British capital over the next 4 days. The security operation is described as one of the biggest in the country's history. Over 5,000 men and women of the armed forces will be involved in the coming week's event. Ukrainian authorities say they intend to drive Russian forces from all the territory they've seized as a counter-offensive gains ground. President Volodymyr Zelensky says 8,000 square kilometres of territory has been retaken and half of that is now stable, the BBC's Ugo Bachega reports.
The liberated village of Balaklia bears the scars of the Russian rule. As residents gathered to receive humanitarian aid, they spoke about living in fear and described the brutality of the occupation. As the Ukrainian authorities return to communities once held by Russia, they're trying to record evidence of crimes and recover the bodies of victims. Ukraine says 300 villages in the northeast, where around 150,000 people live, have now been taken back. Officials suggested logistic hubs in the eastern Donbass region would be the new focus of the counter-offensive.
A Kawerau paper mill worker says he's relieved the 5-week-long lockout of union members is at an end. An employment agreement was reached today between the company Essity and union members, meaning workers will return to work on Monday. Machine operator Bill George says it will take time for trust between workers and the company to be regained. He says he's glad the community rallied around the locked-out mill workers. New Zealand shares have escaped lightly after worse than expected US inflation numbers triggered global market turbulence. Wall Street's markets fell 4 to 5% as the inflation numbers reinforced expectations of more aggressive interest rate hikes. But the benchmark NZX 50 index has trimmed its losses and closed about 0.89% lower compared to falls of 2.5% for Australia and major Asian markets. Hobson Wealth Investment Advisor Ed Glennie says the local market has rallied in recent weeks and has given back some of those gains, but has also factored in that New Zealand is ahead of the US in taming inflation. And a survey in Japan suggests young adults have less intention to marry than ever before. The study sheds light on trends that could exacerbate the country's already dwindling birth rate. Our correspondent Dave Yin reports.
A new Japan-wide survey has shown that a record 17% of men and 15% of women aged 18 to 34 have no intention to marry. That's according to research conducted by Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research based on 2021 data. The institute canvassed 14,000 unmarried men and women. The number of individuals with no intention to get married amounted to the highest figures since the questionnaire began in 1982. This figure has steadily grown since 2002. According to a record number of respondents, a spouse's ideal lifestyle involved balancing a career and raising children.
That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, singer Sophia Ko. From Malaysia to Pakiranga to Newlands to Melbourne and now back to Aotearoa with her 1930s cabaret, Shanghai Style. Naomi McCleary talks about turning Morris Shadbolt's old house in Titirangi into a West Auckland writers' retreat. The BBC goes in search of animals that can count, and a guide to doing your OE, or having it done to you, was this week's Hump Prize on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on radio, rnz.co.nz, and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Taumaru Nui, including the Coromandel, the Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Isolated showers, clearing tonight. Fine at first tomorrow, but isolated showers again from the afternoon. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, showers with snow above 700 metres, affecting higher roads this evening. Showers retreating to the ranges tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine elsewhere. From Taranaki to Wellington and Wairarapa, showers clearing to fine this evening, mainly fine with a frosty start tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from scattered showers in Nelson, clearing tonight. Canterbury and Otago, fine today, a frosty start tomorrow, then rain developing in Clutha and Dunedin in the evening. Bulla and Westland, fine with frosts overnight, cloud increasing tomorrow evening and coastal showers showers developing. Southland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with showers about the Southland coast. Rain developing in Fiordland tomorrow morning and elsewhere at night. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, long fine spells. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Queen has spent one final night at Buckingham Palace after her coffin was taken there from Scotland early this morning, New Zealand time. It was met by King Charles and other members of the royal family who spent the night together as a family away from the public eye. Today, the Queen's coffin will be moved to Westminster to begin 4 days of lying in state. Corin Dan is in London and he joins us now. Corin, where are you and what's going on there?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, last time we spoke, we were at the front of the queue to go to Westminster Hall. We're now pretty much at the back, although it's getting longer by the minute. We're between Lambeth Bridge and Westminster Bridge, and it is expected to run for kilometres from here. Let's just see if we can chat to a couple of the people in the queue as to how they're going. It's been a long, cold night here. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Your name?
Tracy.
Tracy. Now, you got here not too long ago, is that right? You'd be pretty happy with your position, I imagine.
Absolutely. I didn't really want to be 5 miles down the road.
Yes, but it's going to be a long wait still for yourself. How long? 10 hours or so from here. How are you feeling about that?
We're all right. We're here. We made the decision to come and we're going to stick it out.
What brought you here to do that?
To pay our respects to our Queen. She's just a wonderful lady. We miss her already. But we're here to go and see her and just say our final farewells.
And how have you been feeling after last night and what we've seen over the last few days? It is, from someone who's from overseas, to watch it here it's been quite something to see.
It has, yes. We were at RAF Northolt, so she flew back home yesterday. So we actually stood by the base and watched her come in. We didn't come into the palace area, but it was again just a really amazing scene. There were so many people there. It was fabulous.
Thank you very much for talking to us, and good luck with the rest of your queuing. Lisa, I'll just come back. So this queue could be running for what? If you're at the end of it, possibly 35 hours. So, yeah, we'll see if it gets all the way to the point they've put a cut-off, but that is the estimate at the moment.
Yeah, that was really heartfelt to hear from that woman queuing there, and it's going to take her ages. Just Mrs. Practical here, what is the temperature like? Is there rain expected? What's the deal with things like toilets as well?
Yeah. So it's not freezing. It's probably 16 degrees. It is wet, and it was really bucketing down last night for a while, and it is expected to be more rain. They've got an army of volunteers helping, good Samaritans if you like, helping to make sure that people are okay. There is going to be a system where people have a wristband and it will be numbered, your place in the queue, so people will be able to dip away to the loo if you like, or get a coffee or something like that. So there are going to be, they've catered for it basically. I mean, let's face it, the British do queuing better than anyone in the world, don't they?
Yes, they do. Now, talk us through how the procession is going to happen.
Yeah, 38 minutes. It will leave at 2:22 London time. It will be precisely 38 minutes long. I was hearing this morning that, in fact, they've trained the horses to walk more slowly than they normally would to carry the carriage, which the coffin will be on, because they want it to go at the right pace. This has been designed to the absolute nth degree. So what's going to be quite striking, I think, though, is that we know that Charles, the brothers and the grandsons will also be walking along that procession. It'll leave Buckingham Palace, it'll go all the way down the Pall Mall, all the way down to Westminster, and there will be so many people. I'm already worried a bit, Lisa, about how on earth we're going to find a spot, because it's going to be 4 or 5 deep in so many places to see that. If last night was anything to go by. There's going to be no music. It's going to be, so that's going to be eerie. There will be soldiers and marching as well. There is going to be, I think, Big Ben will chime, so that will be the sound that people will hear. But it's going to be pretty moving, I think.
Yeah, it was really striking when they were carrying her coffin in Edinburgh, and you can hear the feet of the soldiers, the archers, who are marching along beside her in the silence. So it brings a real atmosphere. And you were in the Mall as the Queen's coffin was brought into Buckingham Palace, and I know that was more less ceremony, but what was that like?
Well, we were actually sort of slightly behind. We were at the gates at the other side, but it was packed deep with people, and the car came around, and there was a very big crowd there, very big, again, 4 or 5 deep at the barrier. Everyone had their phones up, looked incredible, and everyone burst into applause, which was a surprise to me. But yeah, no, and the thing is that car was so open, and the glass, and you could see in, and now I'm told or understand that was designed specifically with some help by the Queen so that she could be seen in the coffin driving in. I mean, it's extraordinary the amount of detail that has gone into this. But just that moment, I think, it is that moment when you see the coffin and you finally, it just brings things home a little bit. You get a little bit of a chill down the spine because it's hard not to become a little detached. You're running around reporting, and a lot of people here will probably feel the same. It's been so long getting to here from Scotland to finally see that. Yeah, it was a pretty full-on moment. But yeah, just those images, that sense of the lights, the people. It was a pretty moving night last night.
I'm curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but to your right, I'm just working out my hands here, to your right on the wall, there's a wall running along the path there. And are those hearts, are they related to the Queen's death and funeral? Do we know?
They looked, no, they're not, but I think they look like poppies of some sort of, or they're definitely hearts. I suspect that's got something to do with a previous event of some nature to do with the war or something like that. I'm not sure, but they were certainly here a few days ago.
Right, but fitting nevertheless with you there with the queue.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Corin. It's really good to talk to you. That is Corin Dan, who was joining us live from London there with all those people queuing, and they're going to be there for some hours. They are really dedicated to saying their goodbyes. Now, while the Queen was making her final journey from Scotland, King Charles was on his first visit to Northern Ireland as monarch. He and the Queen Consort greeted crowds at a castle, some of whom had been waiting for well over 24 hours. He then went on to meetings with political leaders, including nationalists who want to break from the monarchy. The BBC's Alan Little has this report.
It is his 40th visit to Northern Ireland, so he knows the village of Royal Hillsborough well. But this is the first time his car has flown the royal standard of the sovereign. The warmth of the public welcome was unmistakable. This is what this tour of the nations is for: direct engagement, informal and relaxed, between the new monarch and the people. They lingered, devoting more time to this than the formal schedule allowed. His late mother famously remarked that she had to be seen to be believed. Public visibility is already a hallmark of the new reign. This, a gesture of gratitude for the flowers left in tribute to the Queen. The royal residence at Hillsborough has been at the heart of British and Irish affairs for centuries. As they entered for the first time as King and Queen Consort, 206 Ulster Battery Royal Artillery fired a 21-gun salute. But inside there was no disguising the tensions that still prevail here, and which have suspended the Northern Ireland Assembly and devolved government. As dignitaries waited in the throne room, subdued, quiet.
And I think we're all very saddened by our loss.
The King greeted senior politicians from Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill spoke to him of his late mother's contribution to the peace process.
We played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
Those sentiments were echoed more formally in an event that would once have been inconceivable here.
During this period of public mourning,
in the throne room at Hillsborough Castle, the Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly, Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey, addressed the King with these words.
Queen Elizabeth was not a distant observer in the transformation and progress of relationships in and between these islands. She personally demonstrated how individual acts of positive leadership can help break down barriers and encourage reconciliation. Queen Elizabeth showed that a small but significant gesture, a visit, a handshake, crossing the street, or speaking a few words of Irish can make a huge difference in changing attitudes and building relationships.
In reply, the King said he would follow what he called his mother's shining example.
She never ceased to pray for the best of times for this place and its people, whose stories she knew, whose sorrows our family had felt, and for whom she had a great affection and regard. My mother felt deeply, I know, the significance of the role she herself played in bringing together those whom history had separated, and in extending a hand to make possible the healing of long-held hurts.
It is 18 after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A period of mourning for the Queen is underway in Jamaica, a former British colony she visited regularly. But Jamaica's Prime Minister says her death marks a new beginning for the country. In recent years, support has grown for a referendum on whether to become a republic. From Kingston, here's the BBC's Nada Tawfiq.
Jamaica, a mountainous island rich in beauty with an outsized cultural influence. But not far from the popular tourist spots are communities struggling with crime and hardship. Trenchtown in West Kingston was the home of Bob Marley, the birthplace of reggae music. It was also a regular stop for the royals on their visits, including Queen Elizabeth, who would view urban projects and community centres partly funded by the British government. Her passing has prompted difficult discussions in this neighbourhood about her legacy and poverty's roots in colonialism.
The average earnings of a Caribbean person in terms of how much I take home per week for the pay is like $50 US. Think about that. How much can $50 US do? With British colonialism in the past, you know, they should have done more for the people in Jamaica.
Because there we just had like makeshift houses where people build their own houses with out of wood and stuff.
Dr. Howard Harvey understands the frustrations on the street. He made his way from here wiping windscreens to earning his doctorate. But he doesn't believe Jamaica is ready to break from the monarchy.
If you're not equipped with all the competencies to be able to handle all the different stress that comes with a republic, all the different challenges, it can push you back.
Jamaicans have been wrestling with whether or not to become a republic for decades. Recently, though, changing views of the monarchy and the global reckoning on racial injustice has swayed many. Polling suggests more than 50% of people here support the move.
Jamaicans are waking up.
Republicans in Jamaica say the monarchy is a relic of the past that simply doesn't fit in today's world.
If we're serious about a democracy, and that's the discussion going on in the Commonwealth, do you want a head of an international organization like the Commonwealth with an unelected head?
It's a sentiment that goes beyond these shores. Jamaica could be the first and maybe not the last member of the Commonwealth to sever its ties under King Charles.
And that report from Nada Tawfiq. Accounts are emerging in Ukraine of Russian brutality in towns and villages recently liberated by Ukrainian forces in the northeast of the country. Locals in one town have told of hearing screaming from a police station used by Russian forces as a base. One man told the BBC he'd been tortured with electricity. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian offensive continues, with footage being posted showing troops raising flags over recently liberated villages. The BBC's Orla Guerin has this report.
Well, we are now in territory that was recently freed by Ukraine. This is the city of Balaclea, and now the Russians are gone. Stories are emerging of what happened here under occupation. This was the local police station. When the Russians came, they took it over and made it their headquarters. And people were held here. We've been told that locals were afraid to even walk by in case they were grabbed and brought inside. Now, there were small cells inside. As many as 8 men were crammed in at a time and held there.
What do you think it's like living under occupation? We were scared of everything. We didn't leave the cellar. When it was quiet, we'd crawl out to eat and go to a toilet. We lived in fear because the Russian soldiers were putting bags over people's heads and taking them away to torture them.
In one of the cells, we've seen there is a prayer scratched on the wall. and people had scratched the days on the wall. We've spoken to a woman, a local school principal, who was kept here for 3 days. She said she heard screaming coming from other rooms. We've also had an account from a man who was held here for more than 40 days, he says. And he says he was subjected to torture with electricity. And he said he too could hear the sound of screaming coming from other prisoners. He said the Russians made a point that they would hear it because they turned off the air conditioning system. As more areas now are being reached by Ukrainian officials, it's expected that more stories like this are going to emerge.
And that was Orla Guerin reporting. The net appears to be closing in on Donald Trump. The US Justice Department is now examining nearly every aspect of the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. More than 30 subpoenas have been issued this week to people associated with Trump concerning countless current and former allies. CNN's Sarah Murray has more.
The Justice Department now digging into nearly every aspect of former President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
The Justice Department and the FBI are all in pursuing what prosecutors and agents referred to as logical investigative steps.
DOJ issuing dozens of subpoenas to current and former aides to Donald Trump involved in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, as prosecutors seek more information about how different aspects of Trump's election reversal gambits fit together. Sources also telling CNN investigators seized a phone from Trump advisor Boris Epstein.
This has been a countrywide steal, a countrywide operation by the left to defraud the American public and to steal this election from President Trump,
who allegedly helped coordinate Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Also hit with new subpoenas, Dan Scavino, Trump's former deputy chief of staff, and Bill Stepien, 2020 campaign manager to the former president.
There were two groups of them. We called them kind of my team and Rudy's team. I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal.
What began as a probe into the U.S. Capitol attack, expanding with subpoenas seeking information on fraudulent electors, funding vehicles supporting Trump's attempt to overturn his defeat, and Trump lawyers.
My goodness, this is how you win cases.
Pushing election fraud claims in court.
There's investigations into the crimes of violence and rioting that happened on the grounds of the Capitol. There's obstructing the Capitol, which is obstructing the work of Congress. There's potential campaign finance violations being investigated on account of former President Trump's Political Action Committee.
DOJ also demanding subpoena targets hand over any information requested by the House committee investigating January 6th, whether those documents were produced or not, as the Select Committee returns to Washington.
We're having very productive deliberations today.
And weighs formal invites for Trump and former Vice President Pence to appear, and whether to begin handing more information to DOJ.
Kenya has sworn in its fifth president a week after the country's Supreme Court upheld the controversially close election. The result, handing William Ruto the win, dashed the hopes of many of the African nation's most powerful political families. Ruto himself began his working life as a roadside chicken seller. The BBC's Emmanuel Ignazza has this report.
And with that marked the transfer of power and the beginning of the presidency of William Ruto, Kenya's new president. Tens of thousands of people thronged the capital's main stadium, some arriving here as early as 3 a.m. By early morning, the stadium was filled to capacity, forcing police to lock out thousands more outside, but that did not dampen the carnival mood here. In his first speech as president, William Ruto promised a new start for the country.
We anchored our campaign on the platform of the economy premised on job creation and the well-being of the people of Kenya, and we have been working continuously on the measures to bring down the cost of living. The cost of living challenges are related in our respectful submission to production. Our strategy to bring down the cost of living is predicated on empowering producers.
More than 20 heads of state from the region attended the inauguration ceremony.
In order for Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania and Congo and Burundi and Rwanda and South Sudan and Somalia, which is coming now, in order for us
to catch up with the United States, we need also to look at the issue of the regional market.
Well, this behind me is the first military parade in honor of new President William Ruto. It's been a celebration that has been marked by military tradition and also an enthusiastic crowd that cheered throughout. But the hard work begins now.
One of the great international filmmakers of all time, Jean-Luc Godard, has died by assisted suicide at 91. From 1960, a string of acclaimed movies made by Godard rewrote the rules of film and influenced countless other directors. The French President Emmanuel Macron says Godard had the vision of a genius. The BBC's Katie Russell has this report.
Bonsoir, c'est la dernière édition. Oui, monsieur, 8e dernière.
Jean-Luc Godard's à bout de souffle, breathless. Cinema before 1960 had never seen anything like it. Edgy, offbeat, full of jump cuts, Godard tore up the filmmaking rulebook, intending to shock the world from what he saw as its complacency. Half French, half Swiss, Jean-Luc Godard started as a film critic, but in his own words, barged into making movies like a caveman into Versailles. His new wave films, like his politics, were revolutionary. In My Life to Live, a Parisian housewife drifts into prostitution. Godard mixed up time and space, referenced pop culture, and his characters addressed the viewer. He reinvented cinema as an art form, his techniques inspiring the likes of Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, and many more. Others were less complimentary. The Catholic Church condemned his 1985 take on the virgin birth as heresy. Jean-Luc Godard was still directing into his 80s, despite proclaiming many times that cinema was dead, and he was awarded an honorary Oscar in 2010. Today, President Macron paid tribute. France has lost a national treasure, he said, an iconoclastic filmmaker, a genius.
The BBC's Katie Russell reporting there. And we're almost out of time. The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, we'll be speaking to Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson about how the government's going to sort out the worker shortage, including teachers.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Police say the driver of the ambulance involved in this morning's crash south of Cambridge has died. The government is spending $24 million on recruitment fees and scholarships to avert a teacher shortage next year. Mourners have begun queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen Elizabeth, who lies in state in London's Westminster Hall from later today. And Christchurch boys' high school students have been subject to a series of violent attacks. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow, after 1 p.m. with the Queen's death, we now have our first king in 70 years. But there have been more kings in our history since 1840 than queens.